You are listening to Thinner Peace in Menopause and Beyond with Dr. Deb Butler. This is episode number 254. Welcome to Thinner Peace in Menopause and Beyond. This is Dr. Deb Butler, Master Life and Weight Coach, and as always, your coach. If you're a woman and you're smart and you're successful and you've been struggling with weight your whole life, and now menopause is making it harder than ever, and you are ready to make this the last time you ever have to go on a diet again, then this podcast is for you. Stay tuned. Hi, all my dear friends. How are you today? I am looking outside in my beautiful woods, and it is snowing, and it is beautiful. I'm looking forward to it. I love looking at it, and I love walking in it. Don't love driving in it. So I'm really happy to be sitting here with you talking. And I've got some really interesting things that I'd like to talk to you about failure, because one of the things that I notice the most from my clients and from the people that I talk to in many sessions is what you make it mean when you see yourself doing something you wish you weren't doing, or when you see yourself doing something that you told yourself that you weren't gonna do, or when you see yourself doing something and you're not doing it the right way. All of those things are really up for becoming curious and not furious. And the reason that I say this, I think it's the best thing I've ever heard, is to become curious, not furious. So this was from my last podcast when I did it with my client, Michelle. And she came up with that phrase, be curious, not furious. And I loved it so much, I'm using it today, but I'm giving her a shout out. Michelle, thank you. And so the things that she came up with in that interview, if you haven't heard it, you need to go back and listen to it. And it's episode number 199 when I did that interview with Michelle. You've got to hear all of her pearls that she gave, because all of my clients are raving about her, how much they learned from her. So I'm assuming that even if I haven't talked to you, if you haven't heard her, you need to hear her, because you'll learn as much from her as you do from me, because she is that advanced. But anyway, what I was thinking about today is that since most of you, when it comes to your bodies and weight and food, when you see yourself either eating something, doing something, or looking at something after the fact, how do you do that? So what Michelle talked about in the podcast that I did with her, she was talking about what happens after she has a storm. Because what I talked about in that podcast was that the reason that she called me to begin with is because she was doing a lot of storm eating. And for those of you who don't know that term, storm eating is when you eat a lot of non-nutritious food when you're not hungry, and it's for really deep emotion. So you tend to end up eating a lot, as opposed to fog eating, which is you're still overeating, but it's usually not a lot of food and it's not as strong emotion. It's usually when you're just not quite paying attention or not quite wanting to pay attention, when in reality, it's always a decision that you're telling yourself you can't make. That's more fogging. But I was talking to her about the idea of storming. And one of the things that came up was that before she met me, she was storming probably every day, every other day, eating a lot of food for a lot of deep emotions. And I talked to her because because she's in my master's class, my advanced class, I still get the opportunities to listen to her and to coach her. And one of the things that she talked about in this class, and that what we brought up in this podcast, was that it's not like she never storms anymore. Even though she's lost weight, she's losing weight, she's very mindful, she manages urges, she still has moments where she finds herself doing something that she doesn't want to do. And what she said about this is what this podcast is about for you today. It's the idea of productive failure versus unproductive failure. Because listen, you guys, if you're doing something new or you're doing something that you've never done before, even if you've done it before in a different way, which is what all of you say, I've been there before, I've done it before, I've always been a failure. When you do this, it's not the same thing and it won't be the same thing. And you got to stop telling yourself, I'm going to do it again the same way I've always done it. because then you don't get a chance to look at anything. But here's what she said is that when she finds herself storm eating, which she still does, she now becomes curious instead of furious. And what that means is that before, what she used to do, her cycle was, and you can probably relate to this, find yourself doing something you don't like, for instance, storming, eating a lot of food, you're feeling real emotional, you know you're doing it, and you can't stop. That's what she used to do every day, all the time. And now what she says is maybe a couple times a month she still finds it. But because she becomes curious instead of furious, in other words, she doesn't beat herself up anymore. She doesn't tell herself terrible things when she finds herself doing it. She doesn't become furious anymore. She becomes curious. And as she said in the podcast, she looks at it as an opportunity to untangle something that's going on inside of her that she is now willing to look at it. And sometimes in a storm, you can't see anything. You're blinded by the storm. Like I'm looking at snow right now. Sometimes it's snowing so hard, you can't see anything. But you know what? The next day, like for her, she says it's always the next day that she can look at it and she can untangle it. That's what I want to offer you, the ability to be able to see the things that you do that you don't like. And storming and fogging are two of the things that I talk about in eating that probably lead to weight gain, disconnection from your body, all kinds of things. And once you can start noticing that that's what you're doing, even though you're still doing it, it doesn't mean you have failed. When you make it mean that you have failed and you become furious, it then is what we call unproductive failure. You just get angry, you just beat yourself up, and guess what? You just do the same old thing over and over and over again because you never figure it out. You never become curious, you just become furious. Once Michelle has been through this process, and once you are listening to what I'm telling you right now, you have the option to make this a productive failure, which means you may not get it right all the time, but even if you don't, which you won't. Those of my clients who are listening to this, you know this. Those of you who are not my clients who are going through this, who see themselves doing it and wonder what the heck is going on, nothing. It's an opportunity for you to look at it and untangle it when you are ready, which may be the next day or which may be 2 days later. As long as you're willing to become curious, you will look at it, you will learn something, and then you can move on. I've said that a lot in many of these podcasts, is that it's not that you won't make mistakes. It's just that when you do, you will learn and you will move on. As Michelle says, you become curious instead of furious. The difference between curiosity and ferocity is when you're furious, that's just beating yourself up and you're in an endless cycle of eating, binging, beating yourself up, eating, binging, and beating yourself up. When you become curious, you see it, you untangle it, you are compassionate with yourself that you're learning, and then you let it go and you move on. And that is the difference between curiosity and becoming furious. I invite you all to learn to use failure and let it be productive for you to bring you to the next phase by becoming curious instead of furious. And of course, when I say this, always remember, when you become curious, you then become compassionate, and compassion always leads to being kinder to yourself. So of course, I would never, ever stop or end a podcast without saying to you, no matter what else you do this week as you become curious instead of furious, please, please, please be very, very kind to yourself. And I'll see you next week. Bye-bye. If you've been loving my podcast, please, please, please subscribe. And also, please, please, please review if you're loving it. The way you heard about it is the way many people hear about it. They Google it or they look for it. And the only way that it pops up is by who reviews it. So if you're loving it, let's pass on the good word and the good news. Thank you.